Arts and Culture Minister Gayton Mckenzie has outlined the details surrounding two national initiatives that are dedicated to remembrance, restorative justice and the dignified return of South Africa's liberation heroes. The initiatives focus on addressing historical injustices by repatriating the remains of indigenous Khoi and San ancestors, as well as South Africans who died while in exile during the fight against Apartheid. Watching developments for us is SABC News senior reporter Mapanga, who joins us now live from the country's capital, where this briefing has just taken place. And Kenny, the minister saying that, this is about restoring the dignity of the dead and bringing peace to those who are still living. Sentiments I think many will agree with.
Indeed, good morning to you, Ayanda, and to the viewers at home. We can expect more of those struggle heroes to be coming home. That is, their remains at least, as the minister has now announced phase 2 of this repatriation process, which not only extends to those struggle heroes, but of course to the Khoi and San communities. This is nothing new with respect to the latter, as we have seen the remains of Sarah Baartman returned to South Africa. So this is about bringing about 58 of those ancestral remains of the Khoi and San communities for them to be reburied in the Northern Cape. But of course, more importantly, we saw that the president began that process of bringing back those remains in that ceremony that we saw. But of course, those remains from Zambia and Zimbabwe were those of organized graves. It's going to be quite challenging for this particular phase that is coming up now, because that includes the contested terrain of Angola, where we know a lot of our struggle heroes, their remains are still there. These are unmarked graves, and these are also active scenes where they have to go there in those difficult environments and try and find the remains of a lot of South Africans' loved ones. But it seems from this briefing that the minister is determined to achieve this task and do it between the next 5 years before the GNU term ends. But to elaborate further, I'm joined by the NPA Missing Persons Task Team Head, that is Madeline Fullard, who has been working on this database since the early 2000s, and you know these cases very well. Specifically, the issue of Angola. I remember last year we did speak about how difficult that area would be and how challenging it was. I think when we left off in that conversation, the assumption was that it wasn't going to be possible to bring those remains back, and that you would embark on the spiritual, symbolic form of restorative justice there. However, it seems that there's now task teams that have been formed to go there and do grave mapping, even if it is in those active landmine sites, and we can expect that some remains will be making their way home.
Yes, you're correct. It is a very challenging burial environment because it was a battle site. But we do believe that many of the remains, it will be possible to recover them. There's no war where the body of every soldier is recovered, but we are going to do our best, and we are very excited to be able to work on this. As the minister indicated, we are going to be conducting what we call phase 2, which is grave mapping and identifying which graves can be located at this stage. It will be a process that is very heavily dependent on DNA testing for identification. So it's unlikely we can identify individual graves at this moment. And we have a range of different contexts. We have cemeteries in Luanda, we have ANC camps, we have village burial sites, and we have battle sites themselves. So in that range of burial contexts, we're going to map out as many as possible, and before the end of the first group home.
There are many cases that the Missing Persons Task Team has taken on since the early 2000s, including the sister of Minister Thembi Simelane. Are these the kinds of figures we can expect to find once you have concluded this grave mapping process in these various countries? It's not only Angola, but you'll also be going to Lesotho to give an example as well. Can we expect some of these cases that have been sitting dormant in those Missing Persons Task Team files to find meaning in phase 2 of this project?
Well, we have different categories of missing persons in South Africa arising from our past political conflict. The first group, as you mentioned, such as Nokuthula Simelane, are people who disappeared at the hands of the security forces. Then we have another group of missing persons, people who went into exile and never returned home. Maybe they died in exile, maybe they Africa. We have a third group of people who died in inter-civilian conflict, for example, between the ANC and the IFP in the 1990s in particular. So amongst all those different groups, we do different kinds of work and they require different kinds of strategies to recover them. What we can call the clandestine abductions and killings by the security forces are the most challenging in that unless you have some information from the perpetrators, it is possibly quite unlikely that we will be able to recover those remains.
And then lastly, we know that you are going to embarking on that first trip to Angola I'm told in July. When can you expect to start doing that grave mapping in Angola? Then of course we've seen the minister mention some form of assistance with the landmines. When can we expect to see that project will start to see remains returning to South Africa?
Okay, well, it's difficult to project. Basically, the grave mapping will determine the way forward. Once we've examined the sites, we'll have a sense of what is possible, and then we'll be able to project timeframes. But we certainly anticipate being able to bring a first group of remains back to South Africa in 2025. And hopefully, there's a rainy season in Angola, so we need to do it basically before November. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. That is Madeline Fullard of the MPA's Missing Persons Task Team. Of course, as you've heard, Ayanda, she's been doing this work since the early 2000s, and we can expect that when this multidisciplinary team heads off to Angola soon, we know that there are some meetings taking place virtually this week. And then they expect that first site visit will take place in the first week of July. And then we're hearing from Madeline Fullard that those first group of remains can be expected just before the end of 2025, that is in November. So we can expect that a lot of families will be reunited with their loved ones who sacrificed their lives for the struggle before the end of the year. That is the first group as phase 2 continues in this historic project. Over to you in studio.
All right, Kenny Mapanga live to us there from Pretoria for that update. Kenny, thanks very much indeed. No overstating, of course, the importance of these initiatives.